Jon Ossoff amid a blizzard of spending. More than $50 million in all. The turnout was enormous, even eclipsing midterms in 2014. Ossoff defied polls in the first round of voting, getting 48% of the vote. But in yesterday's runoff, in spite of a court ruling allowing new registered voters and adding 32,000 votes, as of this morning, his percentage from the first round only increased by 1/100%. Joe is actually in this morning, even though he's fighting laryngitis, but to talk about the significance of Handel's win. Joe?
Well, I don't think you can overstate the significance, obviously, for the new Congresswoman, for Republicans in Washington, and also for Donald Trump. This is a district that Donald Trump only won by 1 percentage point, and we've been bringing this up all along. If Democrats were to fall short after all of those marches, after all of the madness that's been going on in Washington, D.C., after all of the money, a record amount of money spent electing Jon Ossoff, if they couldn't win there, that was going to be a huge setback. Now, if he'd won, even by 1 percentage point, it would have been a massive victory. But as we said all along, all the chips were pushed to the middle of the table here. This was a winner-take-all. And it was a huge win for Republicans and a big loss for Democrats. And it's something, Mickey, we've been asking Democratic leaders from the very beginning, are you willing to vote in people in your primary process that reflect the districts in which they run? And the answer is we finally got to a yes after a lot of no's, but they still have a very long way to go. If you have a young guy like that, without a family, not been in the community, he doesn't live in the community, he doesn't teach Sunday school or go to the synagogue every Saturday, or if he doesn't coach baseball, if they don't know who he is, then it's a lot easier to stick a picture of Nancy Pelosi next to Jon Ossoff and say, oh, well, if you're voting for this guy, you're voting for Nancy Pelosi. If you get a guy or a woman that's from the district that people have seen in worship services for 30 years, that know their families, they're at the PTA, you get a guy who's a banker at a small community bank that talks, oh, come on now, Jim, you know me. I'm going to represent you. I'm not going to represent that Nancy Pelosi. I'm not even trying to be funny here. It's just the truth. And I think that's one of the Democrats' biggest challenges coming off of last night. The other is they've got to figure out how to win. And going further left is only going to lead to more losses. I know. I was on Twitter last night. They were going crazy. If you're in the South, you got to speak to the South. Republicans forget how to speak to the Northeast. They forget how to speak to New England. And when Barack Obama won in 2008, they were the party of George W. Bush, they were the party of Tom DeLay, and they were the party of Newt Gingrich. And guess what? Not a single Republican represented anybody in Washington in the entire region of New England. That's what Democrats have to look at and say, how do we get past that? And how do we start getting people that reflect the regions that we're trying to win in?
It really shows the challenge.